All right, I am honored to introduce our host extraordinaire, Jef Lambdin. Jef is a teaching artist who shares workshops, residencies in mime, theater, mask, circus arts, playwriting, ensemble techniques, melodrama, and commedia dell'arte, as well as arts integration. He is a founding member of the Southeast Center for Arts Integration, has attended the Lincoln Center Institute International Educator Workshop, and was a North Carolina A+ Fellow from 2005 to 2021. He is also a performer, sharing his mime, variety arts, and mask theater for children and families at fairs and festivals throughout the South as the Interactive Theater of Jef. I'm pleased to hand it over to Jef Lambdin. You're muted, Jef.
Unmute first, right? I was trying to be a good boy and kept muted. All right, it's good to see everybody. It's good to see your names on the screen, even if I can't see you. Welcome to our 6th professional development workshop for teaching artists. And the title of this one is What Teaching Artists Need to Know About Working with Students with Special Needs. Okay, I am Jef Lambdin, and I want to first introduce you to our panelists today, our professional panelists. Josh Padgett, wave your hand. Josh, say hi to everybody, is the Fine Arts Director at the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. And Carter Boucher is a master teaching artist with Arts Access in South Carolina. Carter, did you wave? And I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I waved.
Okay, good, good. So welcome to both of you. So happy to have you to be able to share your knowledge with everybody. Now, today we're talking about working with students with special needs. Now, we need to realize that all of you in our audience, you run the gamut from beginning teaching artists all the way through really seasoned professionals. And we will try our best to share information that all of you can use. Now, we've designed today's event so that a topic is introduced. After that topic, we then go into a question and answer, very brief, and then we go to the next topic. So know that we will be stopping along the way for you to ask questions. If you want to ask a question, you can put it into the chat by typing it in, or you can raise your electronic hand. If you raise your electronic hand rather than just go like this, right? If you raise your electronic hand, you go to the top of the queue and we actually see that you have your hand up. With many people on the grid, if you just go like this, we can't see you. So please either type in your question into the chat or raise your electronic hand. All right. So Kimberly, let's go to our first slide. Ta-da! All right. This is a 3-year project of professional development for teaching artists. We are in year 2. All right. This is our 6th webinar. And as I mentioned before, it is about working with children with special needs. Our focus will be why teaching artists need to know about this aspect of education and how the arts fit into the scheme of working with students with special needs. Let's go to our second slide. If you are new to us, you need to know that webinars 1 through 4 are currently up on the South Carolina Arts Commission YouTube channel. Webinar 5 is being worked on right now, so we just did it in May, so it's not ready yet. But if you want to refresh yourself, or if you haven't had a chance to deal with any of these other topics that we've covered, please feel free to go to YouTube, and it's SC Arts COMM, or you can use this whole URL. But that's how you find the other webinars, okay? So check out the link on the slide, or SC Arts COMM is the YouTube user name, okay? Let's go to the next slide. As you can imagine, this topic covers a variety of individuals, conditions, and diagnoses. So it's very broad, and we're going to try our best to deal with a lot of it. Okay. Now, our two guest presenters today, Josh Padgett. There's a great picture of Josh and some of his students, and Carter Boucher right down there in the bottom, right? We are so happy to have you with us today. Now, I'll begin the webinar with some information about legislation and purpose and scope. And then Josh will jump in and focus on accommodations and modifications. And then Carter will he'll be our final presenter, sharing the breadth of his knowledge from his many years working with students with special needs. Okay. Now, if we do not get to your questions today, please feel free to email any of us, and that information will be in the chat after a little while, right? With any questions you have, I do answer emails, all right? And I know that Carter answered my emails, and Josh is usually pretty good too. So if you have any questions, please ask. All right, let's go to the next slide. What are we talking about? Now, you need to know that this language in this slide is taken directly from the legislation, right? These are all of the types of what they call disabilities or impairments that are involved in working with children with special needs. And I'll let you read them, but they run the gamut from physical to neurological to visual, all sorts of things. It is a wide topic. Let's go to the next one. All right. Now, within the South Carolina Department of Education, is that right? No. Both federal and state laws say that school districts must provide, and you can see it down at the bottom of the slide, they must provide students with disabilities a free and appropriate public education. All right. That comes from South Carolina legislation and the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Act. Let's go to the next slide. Now, within the South Carolina Department of Education, the folks responsible for making sure all of the school districts, all of the schools, and all of the teachers and the teaching artists comply with the legislation. It's called the Office of Special Education Services. And if you want details about any of the actual pertinent legislative information, these are the people to talk to. All right, let's stop sharing right here for a second and see if that's just meat and potatoes, everybody. Does anybody have a question you'd like to ask about that? I've waited my 7 seconds. Let's go to the next slide, Kimberly. All right. Now, all right, as many of you know, I've been a teaching artist for a few years. Even with all of my experience, I continue to be surprised and amazed at situations I encounter when I teach students in public schools. The seed for my interest in this particular topic came this year. I was confronted with a situation that was new. This slide summarizes what I was told about an upcoming residency. There are 64 students, approximately 15 to 18 in a group. It is second grade with 5 special needs students integrating in, but only about 1 or 2 in each class. And always the classroom teacher will stay with me. This is what I was told. So in my conversations with my sponsor, I thought to myself, okay, it seems pretty straightforward. And so I approved the format for the residency. Now, what transpired on the first day was a surprise. During one class, as I began working with the students that were there, and there was a teacher with me, another teacher appeared at the door. She dropped off 4 students to participate who are not normally taught by the teacher who was with me. And then that teacher left. So at this point, I greeted them and I started integrating them in the class, not knowing what was going on, and I included them in the work. Well, as the class progressed, it was apparent to me that these students focused on things differently. They had different physical and emotional capabilities and would need continued special attention in order to succeed in the class. So when I mentioned this to the teacher who was staying with me, she said that she did not know these students and their abilities because they were not normally integrated into her classroom. Well, we made it through the first class, doing the best we could. After that, I insisted on meeting with the teacher of these students in order to determine accommodations and modifications I could make, right, when working with them. Well, that conversation allowed me to make choices in my teaching practice so that these students could gain the most from the work. Now, frankly, this is the conversation that should have happened when we were planning the residency, not on the fly after the first class. Let's go to the next slide. So we will explore the best ways to do this. These are questions I came up with at that moment. Do I need to modify or accommodate my work? How do I determine evidence-based practices? Who at the school can help me? And what should I communicate to my sponsor? So as a teaching artist, that's what I had to do. All right. Now, to help all of us in determining answers to these 4 questions, I'd like to bring up Josh Padgett. So Josh, if you'll take the stage.
Hey, everyone. I don't know exactly who I'm speaking to. I know you guys run the gamut of all kind of different levels. So just nice to meet you. I'm Josh Padgett. Just letting you know. So I taught 14 years of instrumental music in Dorchester 2, which is in Somerville, in a very large school, 1,100 students. So I've been there where you're teaching 7 periods a day. And I was teaching we mainstreamed our students, and I didn't do the best job of doing accommodations and modifications simply because I was overwhelmed with numbers of students that I was seeing each day. But anyway, I'm the director of fine arts at the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. It's so nice to see everyone. I'm going to make sure I can see my PowerPoint. So we're a school of the blind. Then we have a separate school for the deaf, and then we have another school, Cedar Springs Academy, for students that are multi-handicapped, so they can be deaf and blind with an additional disability. And so when we're talking about accommodations and modifications, really the simplest way to explain it is, if I was explaining it to someone who's beginning, I would say accommodations is how you teach it, and modifications is actually what you teach. So that's kind of breaking it down simple on out. Accommodation generally tends to be more as a tool and a procedure and a resource, or changing the environment to accommodate that student. Now at our school in Deaf and Blind, 100% of our students are on IEPs. And when it comes to the arts, our goal is always to make the arts accessible to our students. So when we're doing accommodations and modifications in the arts rooms, it's always in that umbrella as it relates to the IEP, but also as it relates to accessibility. And below, I don't know if everyone see the mural that Carter did with us. Actually, he's here and he's the one who did that. And so those students were VI. He'll tell you more maybe when he comes on our campus how we address accommodations. But so I don't have so example of modifications is on my other slide I had an example of accommodations, but I could tell these too. But modification is I believe that's a kind of a harder one to address, because you're actually changing what in the inside the curriculum. And this really should be, like Jeff mentioned, before I bring in an artist in resident, during that planning period. And luckily I'm the kind of you always need, I think you need to have a point person. So when something does arise, you can address it with that person right then, have someone to really, hey, I need to have this information. And speaking with our IEP coordinator, accommodation and modification forms, they don't feel that it would violate the FERPA Act for with the student, especially if there's maybe a waiver. So you'd like to have this before coming in on what is expected when it comes with this. And most teachers can get this. These accommodations, modifications are in Rich. Most districts have that. That's where we keep ours. But also they just get working with a special ed teacher. So if we can get to the next slide. Oh, and there's some accommodations. You can kind of see as it relates to us, you see it all, it really addresses the accessibility, correct? Like if you're in a deaf, if we're teaching, if we bring in one of you, an arts resident, one of you guys in, and you're working in our deaf school, we wouldn't, first of all, it's against the law, but also it's just not, best practices. Also, you really want to have your heart in addressing what's best for the student. I think we all have that. So you would definitely have an ASL interpreter with you, or someone who can interpret your directions to the student. You would never want not have that communication barrier addressed. And also it relates to our VI students, magnifying devices, and some of our accessibility devices we would have and you can see the difference between the two, accommodations and modifications, and what they mean. So when I'm explaining to someone, I say accommodation is how you're teaching or how you're addressing it, and modification is actually what you're actually addressing. So we can go to the next slide. And we're just going to keep going there. So this is an actual accommodation modification form for us. And this is what it would look like. It's a Jane Doe student. So, and we just kind of pull these, my students, my art teachers kind of made this one up and took some, but from real world terms. And you can see where the accommodations, what it would look like. And so I would think if I was going into a room, or if I was going to teach some students with special needs students, this would be very helpful. But you can go ahead and go to the next one because it's a lot. So these are real life examples from teachers at our school. So I've asked them to put together some of the ways that they address accommodations and modifications. And these are real teachers. So I can give you their email too if you have questions about how they do this. So Liz, she's an art teacher at School for the Blind, and Carter knows all these wonderful people also. So when she's student, she makes tactile versions of two-dimensional artwork so they can read the painting through the sense of touch. And she'll make large copies of printed images and sometimes thick black outline. And how we know if a student reads Braille, or if a student, if a student needs large print, is through their IP. That's how we get the information, and they get it through Enrich. And also present levels of performance, we can get that. And that kind of has their literacy levels. All right, the next one. So her modifications, she would allow students opportunities to make choice about materials they work because they feel more confident in expressing their creative sides when they're using materials that they are familiar and comfortable with. Because especially when it comes to students who are VIs, some materials really they do not like to work with, or they might just shut down if they don't really like what they're feeling. But and they also love other stuff. So that's one of the ways they do it. And some students prefer 2D or 3D. In our school, we're lucky enough, our population, we can really divide them up to small groups. So that kind of helps when we're addressing modifications. Okay, the next one. Laura Elliott, she's a teacher at Cedar Springs. I mentioned, so some of her students have more than one or two disabilities. So she uses textured plates to represent certain colors, tactile objects, adaptive tools for students with fine motor skills such as adaptive scissors, brushes. We use certain companies also. If you ever want to know some certain companies who focus on accessibility when it comes to arts materials, I have some of those vendors I prefer to work with. Okay, next one. So you can see the modification is so a finished project may be a different size because it's especially how it's assessed. Which I'm not going to read these, but I definitely just want to kind of start getting you an understanding of the difference between the two, especially as it relates to assessment. I believe that's important also. And go ahead and you can go to the next one, maybe, or not. If you can go to the one on the deaf music is the next one, I believe. Or, oh, it's not right. I just but the main thing, you can undo it. I'll just talk.
Sorry, I cut out those last ones because you.
Oh, that's problem. That's problem.
Sorry.
Because there's one slide coming up later. Lauren, so we teach music at the deaf school. And when you're addressing stuff like almost, and it's okay how I tell our teachers too, sometimes we have to adapt and not everything's going to work perfectly. And so you're really just trying to address some things that you find out. We monitor and adjust like all teachers, especially when students with special needs. Certain students like this, certain students do not like that. And that's really, I mean, of course, with you guys, we're bringing an artist in resident. Like Carter's been in our school over years, so he's starting to develop relationships with students with special needs. And as you guys know, that's so important when dealing with students with disabilities. That routine and that just that relationship. And that really helps. And like I said, we do our best to address those needs, but we do change things and we adapt when we need to. And we think outside the box, and we stay there sometimes. So Lauren is a wonderful teacher. She's a music teacher. And when she's teaching students who are deaf, you can see she uses a PVC pipe placed against an amp for students to feel the vibrations. And now this might not be specifically in their IEP, but when addressing music standards, that's what we do. And we talk about, and she'll talk about using balloons, but you can go to the next one, the next slide. So visual ASL is very important. So ASL, so, when you're teaching, students who are deaf, you need to know, ASL. But ASL triples, they should be present in class. Either a teacher can do it or an actual interpreter, certified interpreter. And students appreciate that also when you're trying. And Crow Music Labs is a great, anything visual, especially when you're working with students who are deaf, is great. And dance and movement should use as much as possible given visual form when we try to do that. So once again, we're just trying to, it's always for us, it's accessibility, but also now Carrie Page is she's a different teacher at the blind school, and you'll see when her accommodation, she changes the room setup. And she uses Braille and large print. You can go to the next one. So she provides descriptions of visual experiences. You need printed materials accessible through Braille large print. So that would, if you were going into a school, you wanted some plan and say, hey, do I need any materials Braille or large print? And you would email that to the teacher, whoever you were dealing with, and hopefully they would be the ones who would give that information to the students. So once again, for the music for the deaf, violent. We don't ask our students to vocalize in the deaf school, but they pick up every nonverbal cue. So you smile, the very facial expressions, and obviously provide closed captioning for any audio material as possible. So you can go ahead and take me off. That was my part. So to sum up, accessibility is so important, but also, the accommodations. I'm gonna give a brief overview of an IEP, but I think Carter was going to do that. Correct, Jeff? I believe this we agreed to. I mean, I can, but I think Carter was going to be the one who kind of does that. But I can, Jeff, you want me to do a quick?
Yeah, you've been using it a lot. Go ahead and just briefly, what is an IEP, an individual education plan? Okay,
that is a plan created by stakeholders, the teachers, the parents, administrators, usually the guidance counselor. Our part, it's the and also you have to have certain different you have to have someone from the school, someone from the different areas of the stakeholders for the students' education, individual education plan. The makeup of it, normally there's present levels of academic and functional performance. We call it PLB. That's just really where the student is at that time. That's helpful when you're coming in just to know, hey, where this student, either the literacy rates, also their functional rates. Also, it tells you what they're good at, or they're not good at, but their strengths. Hey, this student is really music. It really perks the student up. This student loves to dance. This student loves to create. So that tells you the strengths and weaknesses are. This student will shut down at this. So what that does, it will tell you some post-secondary considerations, but the goals, the annual goals, and it will then in the IEP has your accommodations and modifications. That's where I was talking about. That's in the IEP. Most and us, we carry all this information in our Enrich. Most districts do. And so if you're a teacher, certified teacher of these students, you should have access to this information. And then assessment participation, it tells you, and then it has anything that they need to know before, when you're going to get with the student, but it's a plan that follows the student. It can be changed throughout the year. You might not get, they probably won't give you access to the whole IEP, but from my understanding, you can get accommodations and modifications. That's really where you would want to go. And also present levels. I think I would want to do that, want to know that. I know when I was a classroom teacher and I was teaching 500 students a day, it seemed like it was hard to accommodate everybody, especially when you have 4 minutes in between classes and you're trying to create, different kind of structuring. But with a little bit of planning, I think you can really at least address most of these. And at least when it comes to me, that accessibility piece is so important when it comes to students with special needs. And that's more focused on the school. Also, they should really address that in the teachers. And obviously no teacher should ever just, drop kids off. I don't think that's right. I wouldn't expect that. But then once again, what's good for us is, so if that happened to, say if Carter was with me, with our school, if that happened to him, he would just call me direct, he would call. So it's always nice to have a person of point, like, hey, listen, we need to address this. So hopefully that helped a little bit. I know it was a lot of information. I was just kind of going through. So just wrap it up. Accommodations is how you teach. Modifications is what you teach. That's kind of the way I look at it. And maybe that will help. Hopefully you got something out of it a little bit. Feel free I'll put my email later. Please email me later if you have any questions.
Great. Thanks so much. I think I'm unmuted. Okay, good. And okay, let's open it up. You guys, that was a lot in a short amount of time. What questions do you have of Josh? Either raise your electronic hand, type it into the chat. What do you want cleared up? What do you want to know more about?
If I don't know the answer, I go to the experts, which are the teachers that I work with. So feel free to go on our website, scsdb.org, and you can kind of get some information there.
Okay. So I guess we're going to move on. Thank you, Josh. That was great. Okay. Please join me in welcoming Carter Boucher, one of the master teaching artists with Arts Access South Carolina. And welcome, Carter.
I think you muted, Carter. Still muted. There you go.
He's got it. No.
Carter.
Here you go. No.
There it goes.
There you are.
Did it work?
Yeah.
I don't know why it wasn't working. I was sitting here clicking on it. All right. One of the first, that was excellent, Josh. And if any of you ever get a chance to work with the School for the Deaf and the Blind, by all means, take it up, because they really take care of you and they'll help you get into the routine of what you need to do. And I do want to mention something while I'm thinking about it, which is I'm wearing my eye patch today. I don't always wear it because it gets hot and itchy. And when I don't wear it, a lot of people don't know that I'm blind in one eye, which can cause problems. Like I run into them, or they come up on my left and stay on my left and stand there. I started telling students in the class about it because they would raise their hand over on my left and wait for me to talk to them. All right, we're doing inclusive residencies. Now, Arts Access South Carolina specializes in working with people with disabilities, but we usually do it in an inclusive environment. Not always. When I go to the School for the Deaf and Blind, everybody there is qualified on some sort of disability, either blind, deaf, or multiple things. Under the Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, a reasonable accommodation is a modification, adjustment to a job, the work environment. We've already been over that, but I just want you to know it's the law. So if you go in a public school and you don't know those kids have something that you need to account for, you need to be doing that in your pre-site visit. Before you do a residency, you need to talk with the teachers or a director like Josh, who will give you an insight into what you're going to have. I've had kids show up who were blind in a regular mainstream public school class, and I hadn't prepared anything for them. And I had to snap to and make a change so that they, in that case, a modification, because I was doing watercolors and we had to switch to let them do their design in modeling clay.
Carter,
Yes?
Would you like for me to share your slides, or would you
No,
like
that's
this
fine.
one?
I'm sorry. Changes that help people with a disability participate. We've already been over that, so I'm going to skip that one. Consult with the students. Now, first you should
We're not seeing your slides.
You're not seeing them?
No, you need to, that's what Kimberly was saying.
Oh, okay.
You're going to need to share them.
All right, hold on.
Down at the bottom, the green thing, it says share screen.
Yeah, hold on. The Zoom is hiding. Where's the Zoom? I guess I'm gonna have to let you share them because they're not coming up.
Okay.
These electrons, they're gonna make our life easier.
Okay.
All right, there you go. Now we're here. I'll get out.
Okay, let's advance a few slides here. Okay. Okay, Josh talked about the hand sign interpreters. If you're at a school working with people who are dealing with deafness, the school will typically provide an American Sign Language person to do that for you, to interpret for you. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, when a student has input in the solution, they're more likely to accept the solution and participate. I'm going to give as an example of this. I had a student who had no hands. When he showed up, we were making paper mache masks. And when he showed up, his assistant said that he wouldn't be able to do the project. And I said that he had to do the project. It was his project. And I looked at the student and I asked him, how are you going to do the project? That's my approach. When there's not some sort of accommodation or modification already in place, what I do is I'll include the person in the solution because they're more likely to accept it. His solution was, could I tape paintbrushes onto his hands and let him use the paintbrushes like chopsticks to pick up the paper mache and put on the mask, which he did. So he made his mask and finished it himself. And at the end of the class, there was a week-long class, but at the end of the class, he came up and put his head on my chest and said to me that it was the first time since the fire where he lost his hands where he felt like part of the class. Now that's an amazing thing, but you need to stay focused on allowing them to have input if they don't already have a solution. All right, go to the next slide. I work a lot with people on the autistic spectrum. It's referred to as a spectrum because it ranges from very mild inability to do social tasks all the way up to being completely non-communicative. You can also, within the autistic population, you need to be aware that some of them have other things. They may be dealing with deafness, blindness, or other disabilities, and those are a spectrum in their own. For instance, I qualify for some help from the Commission for the Blind in South Carolina, but I'm not fully blind. I'm still allowed to drive a car, believe it or not. All right, next slide. And here's an example of how I modify things on the fly. When I have a mixed group of students have different problems, maybe some of them are paraplegic or they have an injury of some sort, I do sing-alongs sometimes as a warm-up to the music part. And when we sing If You're Happy and You Know It, I tell all the students if they can't do something that one of the kids calls out to do something else. I let them make it up themselves. So if someone says, clap your hands, and one of them has an injured arm and they can't clap their hands, I let them stomp their feet. I tell them, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, your response is your response. You just do what you want to participate. I find this works very well. I've had students in wheelchairs raise their arms, and just ones who are in wheelchairs who can only control it, a quadriplegic who could only control it with eye movement or with a blowing tube, move their chair back and forth in response to the song. A nonverbal child might dance. I just let them do what they want. Now, some accommodations will get you through that. Let's go to the next slide. All right. Unconditional positive regard is something I work with a lot when I teach. And it comes from Carl Rogers, a famous psychologist. And the general definition is the attitude of complete acceptance and love for yourself or someone else. And when you use unconditional positive regard, that doesn't mean you'll accept everything they do. It just means that it doesn't make them unlovable or not fully human in your eyes. And if you treat everybody like this when you're dealing with people with disabilities, it'll go a long way towards making things work. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Why we say a person with disabilities. I'll admit, before I got blinded, I was not as sensitive, even though I work with people with disabilities. I wasn't as understanding of why specific terminology was being used. But if you say someone's disabled, that's a label that puts them in a box. But if you say a person with a disability, then it's just something they're dealing with. When I started losing my vision, I didn't tell people for a long time that I had lost vision in my left eye, because it made me feel like they treated me differently. Let's go to the next slide. People who are blind need to feel or hear a lesson. For instance, I did a residency at the School for the Deaf and the Blind with the blind school, and we did masks. And what they did was they would feel their face and make a paper mache mask, and they could do it completely by feel. But I want you to be aware not to be making assumptions when somebody has a disability. One of the students there, even though they were completely blind, had a strong preference on colors to finish their mask in. And I asked her how she had such a strong feeling, because she told me she had been blind from birth. And she said, well, her preference on colors for her mask were based on the emotional content that colors had based on books she had read. All right, let's go to the next slide. And this is also true. The blind students made some of the best paper mache masks I've ever seen in my 40 years of residency. Some could see the shape of a face in general, but not the detail. But like I said, the completely blind girl, she made a beautiful mask. She finished it with colored paper, and she was so into it, she came and made 2 masks. She came in her free period and made another mask. Okay, go to the next slide. Slide disappeared. Bigger is better. I recently had to call for a tow on my car, and on the back of the AAA card was the number in small black letters on a gray background. Now, I don't know how well everybody attending can see, but for me, that's hard to see. Next slide. Bigger is better. They could have printed the number all the way across the card. There was lots of blank space. Next slide. Bolder is better. It was in fine print. Next slide. Contrast is better. More contrast. So when you're doing your lesson plans for kids with low vision, think bigger, bolder, more contrast, less information per page, or per billboard if you're working on a blackboard or a whiteboard, less information. Next slide. For printed materials, a yellow background with black letters improves readability. That is why ledger pads are traditionally yellow. Next slide. I use a black background on screens to reduce the amount of radiant light. People like me who need to accommodate my glaucoma, which is very sensitive to excessive light, do better with a black or dark background. It just is less light going into the eye. Staring at a white or yellow screen, incidentally, is not good for anybody. Everybody might ought to consider using a dark background. Next slide. Other colors, orange on black is good, green on black is good. Those are available, by the way, on most computers, either Mac or Microsoft. You have high contrast settings built in. Next slide. Other colors, blue with orange is good. Not as good, but good. Color combinations to avoid include red and green. There's a type of color blindness that has specifically a lot of trouble reading red and green. Dark colors and darker hues. And that would be, putting blue on black, that kind of thing. Mid-color tones, red, green color blindness. That's very difficult for them. Light colors and grays. Okay, notes in green were added for clarification. Next slide. Did anyone find the extreme indentation on the words colors to avoid slow down the reading? Position of letters on a page matter when you have low vision. Something that is in the normal position, either centered or left adjusted, is just easier for the person with low vision to find. Next page. Low vision accommodations at the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. We were painting a mural in order to accommodate the low vision students and blind students. The wall was painted black and the stencils were painted white. By the way, thanks again, Josh. Josh recommended that I paint the stencils white. And to accommodate the blind students, I also made the stencils extra thick so that they could feel the shape that they were going to paint. And they stippled the paint in with paintbrushes into those stencils. Next page. These are some screenshots of the mural that they painted in the bowling alley. Now, this was partly painted by kids from the deaf school, but more than half the work was done with the kids from the blind school. Next page. Deaf and hard of hearing. Face the students so they can lip read. When I first went to the School for the Deaf and Blind, I just was used to turning sideways, not my back to the students, but I would turn sideways and stuff. And I had to retrain myself to make sure I stayed facing the students. And then I learned that that was actually good with all populations. Whether we realize it or not, we all lip read just a little. Learn hand sign and have an interpreter with you unless you're very proficient. I tried to learn some hand sign, but it's very hard to stay proficient at all unless you work with it every day. Demonstrate in the clearest way possible. My goal for my demonstrations when I work with students with hearing problems is to do a demonstration that if I didn't speak at all and didn't give out any written information, they would be able to watch what I did and do the project. Next page. Written instructions. As much as possible, have handouts or write on a whiteboard. I personally prefer to have large writing either on a whiteboard or on a blackboard, something that's just posted in the room they can refer back to. Next page. Physical disabilities. I already told that about the kid with the hands. So next page. Next page. Sorry, I got ahead of myself and told that earlier. If you have a student without fingers or fingers without control, you can tune a guitar to an open tuning and let them use a bar. If that doesn't work, they can drum. Now, this is a modification. You're changing things. I had a student in a wheelchair and I was told she would not be able to participate. I got her to hold a boom whacker, that's a colored piece of PVC tuned to a note, under one arm and tap out a rhythm with another boom whacker in another hand. And later she was actually leading rhythm drills because I let the students take turns leading and following. And what they do is they tap out a rhythm and then everybody else tries to match the rhythm. And this led to her gaining more motor control. I talked to her father. I saw this kid over several years, actually 7 years, and every summer. And he attributed the projects that we did in the summer camp with her gaining more control and being able to do more things. Let's go to the next slide. Now here's the hard part. And this is a balancing act. And you know, when Josh said something about things don't always work, I was nodding my head. That's right. You want to assist as little possible for the student to participate. All right. What I mean by that is just because they're struggling a little, don't take it away from them and do it. Let them try and do it. And then if you need to add further accommodations or modifications, do. But it's important that the students do the work themselves. They don't gain anything out of it if you do it for them. All right, let's go to the next slide. I avoid working on the students' projects. That's again, so they can have ownership of their project. I'll demonstrate on scraps and throw them away. If they ask, why won't you correct their work? I just tell them it's so that when someone tells them how good it is, they don't have to say that Mr. Boucher did part of it. Ownership of the artwork is important and it helps the students' growth. Next slide. It's about the student. It's better for the development of the student to have a lump of paper mache they squeezed and let dry than to have a cute project that you made for them. I think most of the artists in this program would agree with that. And that comes with music too. Next slide. Establish reasonable and appropriate expectations. Discuss with us what a successful residency would do. Now, this is in your pre-site visit. I recommend going to the school if you can. If not, you can do a Zoom meeting or at least a phone call, but talk to, if they have an arts director or a coordinator, talk to that person. If you're just working directly with the teacher, talk with them about things, what each student's going to do, and ask them if you need any accommodations or modifications. Discuss what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And don't expect cookie cutter projects, just have reasonable conditions and time. Next slide, emphasize that each student needs to attend the classes, not a different student each period. I've had problems with some schools wanting to substitute different students in each class. Ask for as much information as possible about the students. Privacy laws prevent some information from being shared, but as Josh pointed out earlier, generally they can share with you the accommodations that have already been made. Next slide. Invite the principal, teachers, and various coordinators to the meeting. Now, if you go to the School for the Deaf and Blind, Josh controls his program. But if you go to a regular public school, you need to get the principal in on the meetings if you can. And if they have an arts coordinator or director, get them involved, because sometimes they will do things that interfere with the residency if they aren't on board in your meeting. If you need special equipment, this is where you find out and get either them to provide for it or find out how you're going to do it. Next slide. Jeff, what time do we end exactly?
5:30.
Okay.
You got plenty of time.
Okay, I thought so. Imagine yourself dealing with the disability. What would you do to participate? Can you project change to make it work? Can you project a change? How would you make it work? Try as much as possible not to do modifications. Try and do accommodations. But it's better to do modifications than to have the student left out. There may already be accommodative devices, but you have to make sure they're going to be available. For instance, I went to work at a school where they knew a bunch of the students had physical disabilities and couldn't use regular scissors. They had platform scissors available, but they didn't request them for the class. So you need to take charge of all that. And if you can't figure out what to do for somebody, do an internet search. It's almost certain that somebody solved that problem before. Next slide. Don't correct a student's work. For instance, when writing poems, we do a critique and revision. First, the student does their critique and revision themselves. Then I open up to the class, but with the understanding that the poet is the final say, not me. They do not have to accept a change from anyone, even me. This goes back to giving the student ownership in the work. I think it's very important, but it's especially important to populations dealing with disabilities, because people often take things away from them and do it for them and don't allow them the growth of working through things. Next slide. This is really important. This is partly respect and partly just legal problems. Do not put your hands on anyone without permission. Now, sometimes when I work with populations, like at the multi-handicap school at the School for the Deaf and Blind, there are some students there that need hand over hand, but you need to have permission before you touch a student, even if you're doing something very reasonable, like helping their hand to mash a piece of paper mache onto their mask better. You need to get permission first. All right, next slide. The autism spectrum. If you went to a country where you didn't speak the language, would you think the local people were less intelligent, or would you start trying to learn the language? That's from a book I just wrote that I've sent off for publishing consideration. And the thing is people on the spectrum often communicate differently. They often have social problems. They don't understand exactly how social communication works. But that doesn't mean they aren't intelligent. Often they're smarter than we are. And I mean that literally. IQ tests don't accurately measure their intelligence, but typically what someone on the spectrum has is, if you take different parts of the brain, like the part responsible for speech and the part responsible for visual thinking, one area may be less developed, but another area is typically more developed. Next slide. People with ASD may behave, communicate, or interact and learn in ways that are different from most other people. Some people with ASD may have advanced conversation, whereas others may be nonverbal. Next slide. People with ASD often have problems with social communication and interaction, and restricted or repetitive behaviors or interest. Now, this goes to things like walking around a room, and I have an example I'm pretty sure is in another slide. So if you would go to the next slide. Walking in circles is a typical repetitive behavior. I had a student I'll call Beth, because that's not her name. I always change the name of the students if I talk about them. Her special education teacher told me that she never participated in any projects. I got the rest of the class started working on their paper mache masks. Then I walked around the room about 5 times with Beth without saying anything. And then without looking at her, I said, you know, if you made a Peppa Pig mask, you could take it home, and anytime it was all right with your parents, you could play with it pretty much anytime you wanted. Then I walked off. A few minutes later, she came over and made a mask. Now, how did I know Peppa Pig? I went to the teachers and asked them if they knew anything about the student. They told me that the previous school had a Peppa Pig doll that they let her play with when she, as a reward, whenever she was behaving the way they wanted. That's where I got the idea for it to be a Peppa Pig mask. Next slide. I had a student I'll call Linda. I let students draw anything they wanted. And she had finished her after they finished their main project, her mother was saying, can't you draw another picture? And her daughter would say no. Each time they repeated the conversation, they both got louder and more angry. I walked up and said, could you do 2? The daughter calmly replied, I can do 2. If you want a different answer, you have to step outside the argument. When people are caught in a conversational loop, and this is common with people with autism, if you argue with them, it just digs the rut of their thinking deeper. You have to say something that's not in the argument. Next slide. Avoid loud noises, especially sudden loud noises. Give clear and consistent instructions. Instructions should be written on a board, given verbally, shown visually, and acted out. And by acted out, what I mean is, for instance, if I'm doing screen printing, I let the students touch the squeegee and do the motion that the rubber blade would do on the screen so they get the feel of it. Pace your comments by watching the reactions of your students. This is very important, especially, I think these instructions, by the way, work with all students, but I think with people on the spectrum, it's especially important to watch their reactions and see how they're relating to what you're saying. Avoid staring. In my publicity photos, you will notice I'm wearing an eye patch. That's because some students thought my blind eye was staring at them. My eye patch gets hot, so I don't wear it all the time, but I do usually wear it the first day just so students get that image in their head that I'm blind in the left eye. That keeps them from raising their hand on my left and expecting me to know their hands raised, or coming up on my left as I'm walking and maybe I bump into them, that kind of thing. Next slide. Make your facial expressions, postures, actions, tone of voice, and words congruent with your intended message. If you tell a child, especially one on the spectrum, that you like their picture, but you're frowning or tapping your foot or you have your arms crossed, they may misread your message. Stick to a schedule. If they're going to be exceptions, let them know at the beginning. Allow variance in what the students produce. And what I mean by this is, if you're producing a bunch of paper mache bluebirds and somebody makes a fighter plane, they'll learn more by doing that than by doing nothing. So I usually will allow them some freedom in my projects. Lead by example. If you want the students to be polite to them. Now, this sounds very obvious, but I find that politeness and smiling, and Josh mentioned something about smiling earlier. I think one of the reasons I succeed so well with students with disabilities in particular is that I genuinely smile at them when I'm talking to them. Start with movement and get the students to stretch and jump up and down every 10 to 15 minutes. If you're working with students, especially young students, they're not designed to sit still forever. You need to let them get up and stretch and burn off a little energy. But with students who have any sort of autism, it's especially helpful to do that. It helps with focus. Next slide. Avoid asking permission if a task is required. One of the problems I've had with assistants when I work with people on the spectrum is they'll ask if something's okay. Is it okay if we go to the next class? I try and avoid that, because once you give them a question and they answer, then you're in a real battle if they said no to what you wanted. So if you have to have participation in something, don't ask permission. If you give the student a choice and they don't argue with what they choose. So if I say, you can choose what color you want to paint something, and they pick a color I don't like, I don't try and correct it or fix their work. I will demonstrate if they are having problems, but I try not to touch the work. Next slide. Excuse me a second. So now I keep going to full screen and I can't see the time. Okay. Good practices in general, if a student's on task, don't compliment them on it until the project is finished. This is especially true for ASDP walkers that like to pace instead of engaging in projects. I told one of the special needs teachers who was working with me to leave this kid I had gotten to work on a project. She said he never worked on projects. I got him to work on a project. She went up to congratulate him for being on task. He stood up and went back out in the hall. It took a while. I eventually got him back and asked her to please don't congratulate him until the end of the project. Manage with the end goals in mind. That comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Next slide. Rewards may backfire. There's research that shows that children are rewarded to draw have less interest in drawing later than those who were never rewarded, and have less interest than they had before the reward was offered. This goes contrary to what a lot of people think, but I try and avoid rewards, especially with the autistic population. But in general, I just try and avoid rewards. I'll let the activity be the reward. Most people, not just children, but most people like doing the arts. It's fun. I just tell them it's going to be fun and invite them to participate, and I usually get participation. Next slide. Introduce your residency as fun and easy, and the students are likely to think that. Always think that what you have to do is easy and it will become so. That's a quote from Emile Coué. If we think cleaning the garage is hard, dirty, and no chance for fun, that's how it will feel. If we approach it like a treasure hunt, it will feel like a game. I think this is one of the truest things there is. Okay, overprotection. Dr. Temple Grandin, an advocate for ASDP's rights. She's a professor, inventor, author, and a high-performing person on the autistic spectrum, has spoken out often against the overprotection of children on the spectrum. And I think that's especially true on the milder end. Parents just want to shelter that child from everything. And what the child usually needs is more interactions and social activity, not less. Next slide. Consider extending this to everyone with a disability. Learning resilience is, if anything, more important than a successful project, not less. Encourage their participation, but don't feel like you have to protect them from having a project go bad. Allow them that same learning experience that everyone else is allowed. One of the things I do is I try and position with students, nobody has to like their song but them. If they do a song and they like it, that's the end goal. Next slide. I was in a car wreck that broke my neck. It took me 4 years to regain motor control. I still have lingering nerve pain, occasional days where my hand does not grip well. When I went blind in the left eye and developed contrast loss, field loss, and advanced glaucoma in the right eye, I no longer had depth perception. This meant I didn't know when the brush was going to touch the paper. I often blob paint on canvas because I hit the surface before I expected, and the nerves in my hand didn't sense the contact. So the effortless gliding way I painted in decades before was gone. I had to learn new ways to paint. I'm a different artist than before, but my artworks have been published more since my vision problems. Incidentally, there are other famous artists that have various problems. The glass artist, Dave Chihuly, is blind in one eye. It meant he couldn't blow his own glass. So he draws the designs and has his assistants blow the glass and do his installations. Next slide. How is it that I got more published now than before? I struggle. I wipe off more mistakes and I throw away more paintings than before. I increase my marketing efforts and I paint in higher contrast so I can see it. All of those are things you can apply to a student who's in one of your residencies. Next slide. Allow for redo time. Next slide. I'm wanting to get to the question section now. Most of all, include every student in a meaningful way. Next slide. I thought that was the last one, but okay. So I want to open it up to questions now. If anybody has questions about how they might change what they do to allow a student with a certain disability or anything like that, any questions about just general residency accommodations or modifications, that kind of thing.
No, Carter, I was just going to add, yeah, Carter definitely, he walks the walk and talks the talk. I've worked with Carter for years. And Carter will tell you, I always preach process over product when it comes to our artists and residents.
Amen.
That's my philosophy. That's how we, especially comes with our students. It's the magic is, as you guys know, as artists and arts teachers, the magic happens in the process. You know, it's great when the product flex that, but that's what's important. And always, because I always need enough practice. And I was going to add, our standards always stay the same. The 2017 College and Career Ready Standards for the Visual Performing Arts Proficiency. Also known as the SCCCRSVPAP.
That trips right off your tongue, doesn't it?
It's so easy to explain to people. But the standards stay the same. It's how we get to those standards. And I do like the proficiency level, especially as it does work well in our schools. So the standards stay the same, just how you get there, and that roadmap and accessibility for the kids is what's important. And thank you all for all that you do. But I'll leave my email in the chat. So if you guys have any questions.
Okay.
Tom, what's your question or comment?
Yeah, so I definitely appreciate trying to get that advanced information and speak with teachers and administrators prior to working with students. But we've talked a lot about, of course, hearing and visual impairments and needs of those students. Are there more common accommodations or more common situations that teaching artists and facilitators can go ahead and start thinking through rather than waiting for that to pop up in a particular residency or session? How would you recommend some of that?
Like what Carter was talking about color in a PowerPoint presentation, that might be one. What do you think, Josh? Carter?
Josh, you have something?
Well, probably you could, since I'm not an artist, a teaching artist that goes in, sees, I deal with really day-to-day operations on my site. And I don't control it. I just remember I lead it.
Right.
We're a team at on our agency. But
by the way, I appreciate that.
No. But you're so obviously I can't speak because I don't go across all the other school, different spectrum. I would definitely address like the SEL, social emotional learning aspects. That's going to be a common, those addressing those needs. And also in the autism spectrum, I definitely would, I think even students with visual, I love, I don't have it, but I love tactile works. Anything that I'm dealing with, I love to be able to feel it three-dimensional. So even if it's a set or if it's, I know some of our teachers have done tableaus. They've made them three-dimensional in like minutes, just so the students can feel it, what it's going to, and so stuff like that. But Carter would probably be better.
Tom, what do you actually do?
So I supervise a staff of teaching artists that mainly work with adults. We work mainly with teachers and provide professional development for teachers.
Okay.
But recently we've really started to also think about adults with disabilities because I think there's a lot of emerging language and knowledge about young people, and there wasn't so much language and knowledge about those of us who are now in the position of being educators and teaching artists. And we still deal with those same needs and those same circumstances. So what I'm trying to, sort of like vis-a-vis is thinking about working with teachers who work with students, and how can we pre-think and be proactive in developing our accommodation and modification toolkit so that we're not always sort of taken by surprise when we encounter someone who needs those.
Well, one thing, there was a thing that went through education as a way to teach, where they used to talk about some people are visual learners, some are auditory learners, some are kinesthetic learners who learn by touch. And when that first came out, I thought, well, then the ideal lesson should do all of those at the same time. So I would try and put drawings and writing on the board instructions. I would talk through them and I would demonstrate them as I talked through them. And I tried to do that with everything. And if you're used to doing that, and I will tell you, when I work with the hearing impaired students, I still speak just like I would if I were doing a class for people who hear well, but I try and incorporate the visual and kinesthetic, let them touch it, let them feel it, let them see it, have written directions on the board. And I also go around and demonstrate visually and kinesthetically for them as I go around the room. So if you design everything you do to hit all three, if one of those drops out, the other two will be present. So what I try and do is when I do a lesson, I try and think, if I couldn't speak that day and all they got was what was written on the board and how I showed them in front of the class and let them touch what we're doing, would they be able to do the project? Would they get the information they needed? Or if they couldn't see what was on the board and they just heard what I said, would it talk them through the project? Now, some projects are very difficult. Like I mentioned, we were doing watercolor and I switched to modeling clay for the student who was blind that surprised me in the class. But I have actually taught some students, like when we did that mural at the School for the Deaf and Blind, where they actually painted, but we used stencils and pre-shaped forms to help them. So you can accommodate or modify almost anything. But one of the tips is if you hit all three and you check each one of the three things you're doing, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, and make sure that what you did would convey all the information, then you're well on your way to not being blindsided in class.
May I jump in
That's
a
really
little?
great.
Thank you.
I would just say multiple intelligences, right? Gardner has it
Yeah,
right. If you teach a lesson all the way, right, you're going to hit all of those points. That's what I was hearing Clarence say, and you know that. The other thing is learn sign language, right? Even a little, even survival sign. That's a good thing, because if the students see that you're trying, they will go an extra mile to work with you.
By the way, that works with students who have English as a second language.
Yep.
If you just learn a few words in their language, that you're going to get much better participation. It works with everybody. But the thing about those different modes, the difference in what I'm saying is go through your plan and see if each one of those modes would get all the information.
Yeah.
Because we all try and do a little bit of that, but did we get it all in any one of those? That's a real exercise.
And then Tom, the other thing that I remember taking a lesson in sightlessness. I'm not saying blindness. I was blindfolded, and then the art teacher had me do an exercise. And that might be, if you're thinking about working with teachers who work with adults, that might be something to do with your teachers, is find people who are well-versed at teaching in that way.
And can I also, I'm sorry, I just wanted to also add, Josh, thank you, Josh. Josh's got to head out. Thank you, Josh, very much.
Thank you, Josh.
I also wanted to add, Tom, that you could go back to that list of the sort of legislative categories of disability that Jef presented at the beginning, and kind of look up just some best practices for working with groups with those individual disabilities. So for example, I've worked in depth with students on the autism spectrum disorder, and one thing that I always just have in my toolkit is a social story. So that's just a little book that I've written that has images of me, of anybody that child might encounter, and what we're going to be doing. And so before I go into a classroom with students with autism, I'll go and I'll present the social story like a storybook, so that they'll know, like, when we go to this place, these are the things that we're going to be doing. This is the types of things that the materials we're going to handle, the people we're going to see, the types of experiences that we're going to have, which just helps them to adjust to that environment a little bit better. So just kind of looking a little bit more deeply into what some of the best practices for each of those individual disabilities are, I think would be another great place to start.
Is that helpful, Tom?
It is. Hearing that about the multiple intelligences, I think sometimes we think that we have to have a novel toolkit to address disabilities, when sometimes the toolkits are things that we're already familiar with.
That's right. Not as familiar
to apply them.
Right. That's a strength.
Yeah. And of course, it wouldn't, the legislation wouldn't be worded the way it is if it was not trying to be to hit as wide a variety as possible. So that's a great place to start. Thank you all for those suggestions.
All right.
I think oftentimes we find that once you start putting an accommodation into practice, or even occasionally a modification, that it is just good for all students. It's not just, it's not something that you're like, once you start using a social story, you're like, why am I not doing this with all the kids? Like it prepares them to be in my space. They're mentally prepared when they come to me, and now they know what we're going to be doing. It just makes sense. So, a lot of times I fall back on, it makes sense for everyone.
I had a student that was nonverbal, and when we were doing music class, she danced all the parts. And a lot of the other students started saying, can I dance it too? And I find that with a lot of these things. Like I was doing poetry, and one of the nonverbal kids wanted to act out their illustration of their poem. And then when I went to the school for the deaf and the blind, some of the blind kids, the way they illustrated their poem, I had thought they would illustrate it with sounds or music, but a lot of them acted it out, becoming living statues, acting out their poem. And there are all sorts of ways to do it, and just be open if they come up with a way that's different than what you want to do.
Very cool. All right. We've gone through a lot today, you guys, and I need to allow Kimberly, are you ready to do your part here? Kimberly always likes to survey, and we're gonna do it right here, right? Aren't we?
We're going to try it. So I'm always looking for the best way to survey people. And so I am launching a survey through Zoom. Hopefully it's popped up on your screen.
I can see that.
It's 5 short questions. If you will just quickly take this survey. If you don't see it, I can drop a link into the chat for the Google form, but I would love it if you do see that, if you could just quickly take the survey, and that helps us know who we're serving. So I'll give you about 90 seconds.
Kimberly, did you want me to do it?
Go for it. Yeah, we'll take all the feedback. Give you just a few more seconds, about 30 more seconds.
Did I do the little Jeopardy song? Da, da, da.
Right.
That's going through my head. I don't know about you guys. Now it is.
All right, about 10 more seconds. I think we've got everyone now. I'm going to go ahead and end it. Thank you very much. And then before, because I would be remiss if I did not try to extract a little bit more information from you, if you have any thoughts about areas that you're struggling as a teaching artist, or something that you feel, a topic that you feel like you could really use some assistance with, or that you think would be great to be covered in one of these workshops, could you just drop that in the chat, please? 1 or 2 things that you think like, oh, it'd be really great to know more about this one thing, or I'm really struggling with this area of my teaching artistry. Any thoughts that you have about what we might cover in our remaining webinars? We want to make sure that we're directing these services to the things that you need. And so please, please, please drop those here. And if you think of one later, then please email me, because I am going to drop my email in the chat right now, so that you'll have access to it. And that's there. So any thoughts about anything that you might need in the future? So while you think about that, I want to tell you about one more thing. And I want to show you this one thing. I mentioned last time the one-stop workshop. The one-stop workshop is a free online professional development tool. And I'm going to share my screen, I think, so that you can see it. So it is a free online professional development tool. You only need to, you will register one time, and I'll put the registration link in the chat in just a moment. You register one time. After that, you will use your email address only. You don't have to log in with a bunch of information. You just use your email address to log in. and it looks like a conference center, like you're going to a conference. When you enter, you'll see we've got all these people walking around, but we have on-demand sessions here. So if we click on that auditorium and those on-demand sessions, it can take us into our virtual conference. And if you look up at this top bar, you'll see that there are a variety of arts disciplines that are covered. We have general professional learning, we have music, visual art, dance, arts integration, theater, creative writing, media arts, arts and education forum, which was an event with speakers that have been recorded and put here. But all of these sessions are free and available for you to use as professional learning opportunities. The majority of these are videotaped sessions, so they have been recorded either from an in-person event or from a Zoom session. So you'll see all of these different professional learning opportunities. And again, this is 100% free and available for you to use. There are also other features here, like you can go to the information desk and find out information about how to engage more with ArtsGrowSC if you have a question, or if you go to the exhibitor hall, you can find more information about some of the different partners that are a part of ArtsGrowSC. So you'll see the South Carolina Arts Commission, which is who I'm here to represent today. You'll also see the School for the Deaf, South Carolina Arts Assessment Program, which has wonderful arts assessment tools, Palmetto State Arts Education. So you'll see some familiar organizations that are serving South Carolina that you might be able to connect more deeply with. So I just wanted to remind you that that's there as a service for you. And before we go, I will make sure to drop the registration link into the chat, and then you can just bookmark that link so that anytime you are feeling like you might have 30 minutes to watch a professional learning session, you're able to get to it there. Thank you all so much again for being here. And thank you to you, Jef. And please let me know if you have ideas for more sessions that you would like to see in this series.
Cool. All right. Good, Miss Kimberly. All right, if you would, go back to my slides and we'll finish up. Couple of things. All right, here, get your print screen out. Carter and Josh dealt a lot with music and visual arts. I wanted you to know that there are people who also deal with the other art forms. Dance, here's a good one. Go ahead and do your print screen about that. This is Michelle's ideas about that. And then go to the next one, please. Do a print screen on there, that one, drama class from Carrie. As you can see, it's a lot of what Carter and Josh were talking about, just in the context of this art form. And let's go to the next slide. So yes, you know, we all need to accommodate the students. We can determine the evidence-based practices. You can do research, you can talk to the people at the school, and the people at the school who can best help are the teachers and the students themselves, right? Communication is key. When you're planning your teaching artist residency, this is a part of the communication, and it needs to be done up front. And let's go to the next slide. All right, get your print screen out again. These are some digital and print resources that might be helpful to you. And then the next slide. These are print resources primarily. I particularly like the bottom one by Sherry Norfolk and Lynn Ford about storytelling. It's real personable, and it can help theater people a lot. And go to the next slide. All right. Now, looking ahead. I want you all to mark your calendars. October 24th, 2023, from 4 o'clock to 5:30 will be our next webinar. But as of this time, we haven't chosen the topic. That's one of the reasons Kimberly's asking for input. We want to make sure we're addressing things that are of interest to you all. So please, if you have an idea, drop Kimberly a line, drop us an email. And we here at the South Carolina Arts Commission, thank you for attending this webinar. Before we sign off, I would like to thank all the folks at the South Carolina Arts Commission who have been so helpful, including Josh Padgett, Clarence Boucher, Kimberly Mott, okay, and all of our partner organizations, the South Carolina Arts Commission, the South Carolina Department of Education, and the South Carolina ABC Project, and of course, ArtsGrowSC. Now, we wish you the best. We hope if you have any questions later on, you'll get back in touch with us, and we hope to see you again soon. You all have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.